O's goal in OT with the black eye. Like, just, you come back to the bench and, Pete's got the ice inside, a latex glove, and he's trying to keep the swelling out of there. I mean, at one point, I think there was a debate about cutting him.
Here's Francis. Nice move to step on Erickson. Francis is in. Tried to make the pass. Shot score! It's all over! How you like that? Jeff O'Neill in overtime. And Carolina wins 2-1. They lead the series 2-1.
Looking back on it, I was never like a major award winner, but that was just one of the cool moments of my career. Just playing against the Leafs, having the black eye and scoring the winner. It was just, it's not a Hall of Fame moment or anything like that, but it was a pretty cool moment for me, that's for sure.
The late Josef Wasicek to Svoboda in front of Marty Jelena. He knocks the puck through Curtis Joseph at Air Canada Center, and I'll never forget that. That to me would be a close second, Adam, in the annals of Hurricane history.
One guy is in the Hall of Fame, one guy should be in the Hall of Fame, and the other guy was a Hall of Famer for the franchise, right? So they knew. They knew that they should have been respected more.
Here's O'Neill stealing one behind the net, played it off the leg, he's got it back, tips it to Francis, who scores! Ron Francis at the top of the crease, puts it upstairs at 58 seconds of overtime, a broken play, and Jeff O'Neill came up with it behind the net off the leg, returned it from the goal line, extended to the top of the crease, and Ron Francis deposited it up over the crossbar, and this stunned Joe Louis Arena crowd has now seen in living color, and it is red and white, ironically, what the Hurricanes have done throughout the playoffs. They win another one, they go 7-1 and win it 3-2 tonight.
It's Yzerman back to Fedorov, empty net situation, so a forward on the point. So one Hall of Famer to another Hall of Famer, to Lidstrom in the middle, another Hall of Famer, and he just found a way, as he always did, to get it through, and Brett Hull tips it home. So Hall of Fame to Hall of Fame to Hall of Fame to Hall of Fame.
Welcome to the Canes Corner Podcast with your host, Adam Gold. The Canes Corner Podcast is a part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network. And now, here's Adam.
The 2006 edition of the Carolina Hurricanes claimed the Stanley Cup, June 19, 2006. Who could forget it? Aaron Ward, Frank Kaberle, eventually Justin Williams into an empty net, etched all of those names onto Lord Stanley's Cup. Brind'Amour, Cole, Hedican, Adams, Wasicek, Wesley, etc. But 4 years earlier, the 2002 version of the franchise was the foundation that 06 was built upon. And those names were all part of that first Hurricanes group that surprised the rest of the National Hockey League. Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Gold, and this is the 25th Anniversary Canes Corner Podcast, a look back at the franchise since relocation from Hartford. Thanks to our friends at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina, and to you for checking in along the way. That 2002 Hurricanes team finished with 91 points, 6 clear of Washington in the Southeast Division. Carolina's point total was only the 7th best in the conference, but by virtue of being a division champ, they were slotted as the 3rd seed in the East. So when 7th-seeded Ottawa knocked off Philadelphia, and the top overall seed Boston was upset by number 8 Montreal, it left the Hurricanes with home ice advantage until they got to the finals. Well, we know what happened in those first 2 rounds. They vanquished the Devils, the team that ended their 2001 playoff stay in 6 games. Then, thanks to the miracle at Molson, and an offense that exploded for 17 goals over a 6-period span plus 314 of an overtime, they got rid of Montreal, all against a goaltender, Jose Theodore, that would be chosen as the league's most valuable player. These Hurricanes were not to be overlooked, though that's how most felt heading into the playoffs. Almost to a man, those Hurricanes felt as though the experts didn't take them seriously. And when you consider the Devils of that time, plus hockey hotbeds like Montreal and Toronto, you can understand why maybe some would have been so quick to dismiss Carolina's chances. In Toronto, the Hurricanes would meet the East's second-best team with 100 points, one shy of Boston, and a conference-high 247 goals scored. The Maple Leafs were loaded. Matt Sundin, Darcy Tucker, Alexander McGillney, and former Hurricanes forward Gary Roberts led a big, physical, dangerous attack, and one of the best goaltenders of his era, Curtis Joseph, backed up a defense led by bruising Brian McCabe. The Leafs were expected by their fans, by their press, and by the national media that covered and broadcast the games in both Canada and the United States to make quick work of the Hurricanes, who were, to this point, probably nothing more than a cute feel-good story. But what happened next put cute in the rearview mirror. The team that authored the Molson Miracle still had the eye of the Hurricane in its near future. In the middle of Game 3, with the series tied at 1, Carolina forward Jeff O'Neill took a puck directly into his left eye. It was brutal. And for Eric Cole and Sean Hill, two of the most important pieces of that team, it was the most memorable part of that series.
O's goal in OT with the black eye. Like, just, you come back to the bench and, Pete's got the ice inside, a latex glove, and he's trying to keep the swelling out of there. I mean, at one point, I think there was a debate about cutting him, but but I don't think the doctor wanted that. He didn't want that scar. So, I mean, it was, it was just, for him to stay in, especially because he had struggled a little bit in the New Jersey series, but to the point where in the Montreal series, I mean, he's the guy, playing on a third line role, winning the faceoff that, Nicky Wallin puts in the back of the net for the OT winner. So like O was a little bit in the doghouse in the Montreal series, and to go back to his hometown and play the way he did, for the remainder of the playoffs for us, he was incredible. And that game obviously had a huge boost, for him personally, I think.
I think that was a huge part of it. Him with the black eye, like Colsey said, was kind of, very indicative of what the series was like. I think it was more of a battle than the other two series. All the series were physical back then, but, I remember, Roberts, Corson, Tucker, those guys played hard, and they were finishing everything, and everybody finishes everything in the playoffs, but not to the extent that these guys did.
Domi,
yeah. I mean, they're, like I said, and they had, Ponikarovsky was a big body, and when he wanted to bang, and Antropov, and I mean, they were heavy. They were heavy, across their lineup, and I think that's probably the biggest thing is how physical the series was, and that, kind of transitions right to with the look,
Here's Francis, nice move to step on Eriksson. Francis is in, tried to make the pass, shot, score! It's all over! How you like that? Jeff O'Neill in overtime, and Carolina wins 2-1. They lead the series 2-1. He looks pretty now, Jeff O'Neill, the hero.
I just remember that Shane Corson was a pretty intense competitor, and he didn't really check in on guys on the ice to see how they were doing. But I remember him looking at me on the face-off. Brian McCabe was trying to ice the puck. I think they were shorthanded, and he hit me right in the eye, and it was just a mess. And I remember going in, and I just said, do whatever you got to do to this thing, but I'm going back out there. And I went on the ice, and I lined up against him, and he was like, Jesus, Murphy, are you all right? And I don't know, I didn't have much to say. It was like, I guess I'm okay. And then to score the overtime winner, it's like, looking back on it, I was never like a major award winner, but that was just one of the cool moments of my career. Just playing against the Leafs, having the black eye and scoring the winner. It was just, it's not a Hall of Fame moment or anything like that, but it was a pretty cool moment for me, that's for sure.
From Jeff O'Neill to Hurricane center Kevin Adams, a one-time Maple Leaf, he understood the magnitude of that entire series.
Playing in Toronto in general in a regular season game is an event. Having played for the Leafs, I lived it, and it's special. I mean, every player loves playing in that building and the atmosphere. Now you take it up a notch of being in the playoffs, and then even take it up another notch being in the conference finals. They had a really good team. They had a veteran team. They were pretty loaded from goaltender out that year. But again, I think there was kind of little bit of a swagger within our locker room that we didn't necessarily, we weren't the flashiest, or we didn't talk about it necessarily, but I think we believed it. And so maybe the outside world didn't necessarily think that was going to happen, but I think within our locker room, there was no doubt that we were going to win that series if we played the game the right way, which obviously, it's what it ended up happening. So it was fun. I mean, man, you're playing in the playoffs and in a Canadian city, especially like Toronto. I think if you asked all the guys from that team, I think every guy would say the same thing. I mean, what a better opportunity could you ask for than that?
That was Game 3 of a series that went 6 games and never saw more than 3 total goals scored in any game. The Canes won Game 4 to take a 3-1 series lead, but Toronto brought everyone back to Canada by shutting out Carolina 1-0 in Game 5 in Raleigh. What followed was one of the most memorable games in Hurricanes history. Then radio voice Chuck Caton.
The late Josef Wasicek to Svoboda in front of Marty Jelena. He knocks the puck through Curtis Joseph at Air Canada Center, and I'll never forget that. That to me would be a close second, Adam, in the annals of Hurricane history. Both those, I can still see Jelena jumping 10 feet in the air and making amends for the double hit back in the 99 playoffs against the Boston Bruins. And so he avenged that, and the Hurricanes went on to go to the finals against Detroit for the first time.
And Jelena is back out to Carolina, to center. Wraps a puck into the lead zone. Eriksson back there. And McGillney takes it from him, throws it behind the net. Wasicek intercepted, center pass. They scored! I think it was Jelena who knocked it in, and Carolina is in a celebration mode now for sure. The building is shocked with that loose play inside the Leaf line that ends up in the Carolina goal. And I believe it was Martin Jelena who poked it home in overtime at 8 minutes and 5 seconds. And Carolina will go on to the Stanley Cup Championship. The Leafs' gallant effort and a gallant try in this playoff here is over.
Well, give Carolina credit. 6 goals against in 6 games. Never mind how many you score. If you can hold the high-scoring team to 6, you got a great chance of winning.
Yeah, I think you should give the Hurricanes credit, mostly because they, won the series. But that was the CBC, and Toronto was their team. But if you ask then television voice John Forsland, it was no better in the United States.
The ESPN call, Steve Levy,
right.
You can hear the shock in his call. The Carolina Hurricanes are going to the Stanley Cup final?
Shot in by Jelena Softly. Eriksson there, bumped by Svoboda. Behind the nets, going away. Cedric, they score! Martin Jelena in sudden death overtime. And it's strange but true. Folks, the Carolina Hurricanes are going to the Stanley Cup Finals. Wow!
It was that crazy. It really was. I don't blame them for having that reaction, but it's kind of fitting that they did because it depicts exactly what transpired. This great team should have been looked at as just a great match for Toronto, but it wasn't. It was like these guys are nobodies. And I think that's what was Adam driving the team to within the locker room. Because remember, as we said at the top, you've got Francis and Brind'Amour and Wesley and and other guys that we've mentioned. But most importantly, those 3 elder statesmen, one guy is in the Hall of Fame, one guy should be in the Hall of Fame, and the other guy was a Hall of Famer for the franchise, right? So they knew. They knew that they should have been respected more for who they were. And just because they had the Hurricane sweater on, they weren't getting that respect at that time.
One of the great traditions in all of sports is the post-series handshake line in the NHL playoffs. After teams get through beating each other's brains in, it's time for the losers to congratulate the winners. Sean Hill and then Eric Cole.
For me, that's the coolest moment in sports when hockey teams are shaking hands, and you go against a team like that, and there's so much respect, and after such a gruesome battle with them, I'll tell you what, it's pretty cool, and it's a lot obviously better to be on the winning side of it. But even for a little extra spice to it, Gary Roberts was a good friend of a lot of ours, and a really good friend of mine, and he was kind of a mentor to me as well. Former teammate and great teammate, and really took me under his wing as far as fitness and rest and that type of thing, as far as getting your body physically ready to play in the off season and keeping it ready to play and recuperation and that type of thing. And that was hard for me to have to do that. To beat them was not hard, but to shake his hand after what he had meant to me as far as a teammate and helped me out so much, it was that was just another layer to it.
Yeah, everyone was pretty good through the handshake line. Nobody, I think at the end of the day, that's like what Sean said. It's one of the best things, especially for how physical and just like how much you have to compete and battle. To win or lose, you've got to you got to go stand in line and congratulate everybody and look them in the eye. Tell them good job, good luck, whatever it is. And for me, I was hated in that series. So it was gratifying to go through, that handshake line. And obviously, with my battle with Robs in particular, it took a fairly large toll on my body. The other part of that is Hilly and Robs communicated up until the start of the series against Toronto, right? That's where the phone calls got shut off. Yeah. So literally usually those two chatting and throughout the playoffs up until that series started, and then the phone calls stopped and there wasn't any more communication between those guys, and
radio silence.
Yeah, it was radio silence. But the guys were coming to the what Sean was talking about with rest and recuperation and things like that. The ART, was it Prebag at the time, or was the other guy?
Lindsay.
Yeah, was coming to our hotel room and doing work on Hilly and adjustments, and Sean's trying to get me to jump on and I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm like, don't worry, Robs will crack my back in the first shift for me. I don't need you to do it for me tonight.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Sean and I, Sean too, I know, I know what it took out of him in that series, because, you're behind the closed doors. For me, I was, breathing up blood. It was just brutal. So it was, it was a lot of, wear and tear that we went through to win that series. And I don't think anybody was really left unscathed of that, to be able to go through and shake their hands in just a absolutely pin drop arena. It was, that was a fun moment.
Remember Michael Jordan's flu game in that NBA Finals series against Utah? Well, Carolina's Brett Hedican had his own version.
Before going up, I think for Game 3, I ate at a specific restaurant, and when I went back to that before Game 6, before we got on the plane to fly up there, I ate at the same restaurant, had the same thing, the stupid superstition things that we do, and ended up getting food poisoning. By the time I got to Toronto, I was getting sick in the hotel room, puked all night long, basically got up the next morning, and I could hardly get out of bed. They threw a couple of IV bags in me before the game. I had I think a cup of oatmeal, and went out and played pretty much the game of my life. To win the game, I think I led our team in minutes that night. I think it was one of those out-of-body experiences that you have where your body's just on autopilot. And I don't know what happened, how I ended up, how I did it, but somehow, some way I did it that night. And, we ended up winning the game, going on to the Stanley Cup.
New Jersey in 6, Montreal in 6, Toronto in 6. all closed out on the road. But what would happen when the Hurricanes no longer had home ice advantage? And that's what was in store when Carolina would meet the NHL's last true super team in the Detroit Red Wings. After the break.
Here's O'Neill stealing one behind the net, played it off the leg, he's got it back, tips to the Francis, who scores! Ron Francis at the top of the crease, puts it upstairs at 58 seconds of overtime. A broken play, and Jeff O'Neill came up with it behind the net off the leg, returned it from the goal line, extended to the top of the crease, and Ron Francis deposited it up over the crossbar. And this stunned Joe Louis Arena crowd has now seen in living color, and it is red and white, ironically, what the Hurricanes have done throughout the playoffs. They win another one. They go 7-1 and win it 3-2 tonight.
Chuck Hayton with one of the great play-by-play calls in franchise history. Ron Francis giving the Hurricanes an overtime win in Game 1 in Detroit, something John Forsland will never forget.
Remarkable moment. Dominic Hasek in goal, afternoon game. I remember leaving Joe Louis Arena and walking back to the hotel and just like euphoric. First of all, just understand that the team was at that place and the team won, and Ronnie gets the goal, and it's a fitting image of the puck going in over a Hall of Famer against Hall of Famer in an iconic building against an iconic franchise with a $70 million payroll, I believe, and the Canes had a $30 million payroll. You had wide disparity. That type of disparity among franchises was going to lead to Armageddon a couple of years later and a salary cap. But that's what was happening in the NHL. And they're rolling out Igor Larionov and Brett Hull and Luc Robitaille as like support players. That's crazy to even think that that's possible with Scotty Bowman behind the bench.
Yeah, that's right. 9 Hall of Fame players, plus arguably the greatest coach in the game's history. Formidable task for sure, but first blood went to Carolina. Kevin Adams.
Again, you look at the team that Detroit had. I mean, I don't know how there would not have been a lot of confidence on their side. I mean, I don't know how many Hall of Famers lined up and out of those 20-some guys, but quite a few. And they were experienced, they were deep, they were hungry. But I do think that, that Game 1, we sent a message that we were there. We weren't there just to be saying we played in the finals. We were there to try to win that series.
Brett Hedican.
I remember this team on the other side that was full of the biggest names in hockey, right? I mean, this was before, the salary cap era. And I looked over there and there was a lot of confidence. You could see almost a swagger amongst them in Detroit and almost a cockiness and an arrogance. And I could kind of feel like this underdog group of guys from, I always call us the Junkyard Dogs that year in 2002 against the Prima Donnas. And I just remember that Game 1, them slowly wiping that face, that arrogance off their face throughout the course of that game and ended up winning the game. And them kind of looking shocked at the end of it. That's the thing I remember about that Game 1 is just kind of wiping that arrogance off every one of their faces for that Game 1.
Eric Cole and Sean Hill remember.
I mean, I can remember being on the bus ride back to the hotel, and I can just remember sitting on the bus ride back and thinking to myself, like, holy shit, like we're 3 away from this thing. I just remember kind of pinching myself a little bit about it, but I think that like that Game 1, I think was a situation where, again, we were probably taken a little lightly by the opponent given who they had on the other side, and I think that like that surprised them, and I think we even. Like I'll always say this, like we actually gave him a really good game in Game 2 also. It was, the late goal, or like a later power play goal. What was it, the one-timer from the point, Lidstrom, and then they ran that AM face-off play where Draper goes right up the middle and they slide a pass and he went in, and all of a sudden it was 3-1. It was like, oh, crap.
And it was like everyone thought someone else scored and like buzzes right past Ronnie to like a pile up, and Ronnie's sitting there like, I just scored that goal. Why is nobody giving me any love here, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think it was, I want to say it was, for some reason I feel like it was O that threw that out in front to him. It was like a loose puck side of the net,
right,
and it got thrown back in front, and Ronnie, deflected it past him. And I think guys were coming off the bench on the way to Ronnie, but they got intercepted by whoever passed.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It was almost like...
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
It was like a 1,000, 2,000, 3, and then all of a sudden Ronnie just went over to the piles like, fine.
Yeah,
Ronnie's, you're not coming to me, I'll go to you.
Ronnie's arms were like on the way down. Like,
what's up with this? I'm the one who just ended this deal, you know?
Yeah, don't worry about me.
Yeah.
I'm just only the lead singer.
Yeah.
What about the goal scorer, Ron Francis?
You look at the Cup Finals, I believe the Detroit payroll was somewhere around $80 million. I think ours was somewhere around 27 or 28. So obviously pre-cap era. Some of the teams we beat along the way, were much more talented, paid a lot more money than our team was, but there was just something about that team, and the guys just believed in each other and believed in what we were doing, and they really didn't pay attention to anything outside, and just went out there and found ways to win hockey games. It wasn't always pretty. Too many times we gave up one late and had to win in overtime, but we just continued to believe in battle, and for that team to accomplish what it did, it was amazing. I still think, game 3, that Detroit series, we gave up a goal late for them to tie it, and we lost in the third overtime. And I still believe if we win that game, the pressure and everything shifts to Detroit, and we have a strong chance of winning that cup. But that's another story.
That was just game 1. Detroit won game 2, 3-1, but it was a 1-1 game until deep into the third period. But all of it was just the prelims for what would happen next when the series shifted to Raleigh for game 3. Here's John Forsland.
It's one of the greatest games that's ever been played. Again, collection of players, the Hall of Fame players that participated in that game. Ended after 1 a.m., and it was one of those games where I think the deepness of Detroit's lineup basically was the difference in the game. The longer the game went, the harder it was for Paul Maurice to get certain players on the ice, and he really overtaxed the high end of his lineup, as opposed to Bowman, who was able to have an equitable approach with his ice time. It's in the hands. It's in the hands of the Hurricanes. Again, 6 attackers, high tip, Brett Hull, one of the greatest goal scorers in the history of the game, scores, go to 3 overtimes, and remarkable hockey game. Just an absolutely remarkable hockey game with Larionov getting the game-winning goal.
Ron Francis, Rod Brindamore, Jeff O'Neill, Bates Battaglia, and Eric Cole all played more than 30 minutes. The first 3, nearly 40. 3 of Carolina's defensemen played more than 40 minutes, including Brett Hedican, who totaled a team-high 49.5 minutes on ice.
Nick Lidstrom, I remember, shot the puck wide of the net, and of all guys, Brett Hull, standing there with his stick kind of aimed towards the goal, just ahead of the goal line. I mean, it just hit his stick shaft and went straight, right, if you're looking at Hull, towards our net, and goes in and ties the game. And then, obviously Igor Larionov with the play in overtime, triple overtime to win the game. And it was just one of those, like somebody stabbed you in the heart.
Hull wants to get in front of the net. That's where he is. Straight out from Irving. Face off. Won by Carolina. They don't get it out. Shot into the crowd. Score! A shot from the blue line. Harmless enough. And a cut by Irving. With 1:14 remaining, this game is tied.
We had him in that game, 50 seconds to go, whatever it was, and had we closed them out, we're up 2-1. And that was another one of those moments where I could see the look on every one of their faces, like, we're going to lose. Like the Detroit Red Wings faces, we're going to lose to these guys, is what I kept seeing on their face. And I'm telling you, we had them right there in that game 3. If we win that game, I don't know what happens. We're up 2-1 coming back for game 4. It was a lot closer series than people might have thought, but we definitely had them on the ropes. But they got off the ropes on that Brett Hull tying the game, and then obviously winning it in triple overtime with Igor Lariano.
Jeff O'Neill.
Yeah, that Brett Hull tip goal from the point. I think I was on the bench watching that, and I was just like, damn. We just needed to win that game so badly. And I think thinking back to overtime, it's like Detroit weren't exactly spring chickens. They had a lot of older veteran guys, and that game going to triple overtime, if we just could have squeaked that one out, maybe that would have tired them out a little more. But they won that game, and they got all the momentum from that, and then it was kind of lights out from there. But we were in it, and we couldn't find a way to win that game. They had that tip-in goal. Lidstrom, I think he had a shot from the point, and Brett Hull tipped it in, and it was kind of game over after that. But it was a hell of a ride and a lot of fun.
Here's Carolina TV analyst Trip Tracy.
Jeff O'Neill scores a goal after Ron Francis won Game 1 in overtime at Detroit. The huge disparity in payroll. O'Neill scores with 11, 12 minutes in Game 3, in a 1-1 series in the Stanley Cup Final, and Roddy goes toe-to-toe with his Nagano Canadian Olympic roommate, Steve Yzerman. Yzerman found a way to win the draw. It's Yzerman back to Fedorov, empty net situation, so a forward on the point. So one Hall of Famer to another Hall of Famer, to Lidstrom in the middle, another Hall of Famer, and he just found a way, as he always did, to get it through, and Brett Hull tips it home. So Hall of Fame to Hall of Fame to Hall of Fame to Hall of Fame. And, since then, I've spoken candidly with Ken Holland, who is the general manager of the Red Wings, and he thinks if the Hurricanes win that game, they had a very good chance to win the series.
Ron Francis, a Hall of Famer in and of himself, knew what the Canes were up against.
Certainly looking at their lineup and our lineup on paper, if I was them, I'd feel like we had a pretty good chance. But they ended up, I think, something like 10 Hall of Fame players come off that roster, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it was a hell of a team they had. But again, our team just didn't. I don't think we took our lunch bills and just went to work and did what we had to do. And we found a way to win Game 1. We lost Game 2, and like I said, Game 3, that one still hurts. But we win that game. I think it's a strong possibility. We have a different outcome. I remember talking to Brett Hull a few years later, and he goes, Game 3, and I said, don't even bring it up. I know what you're going to say. And he said, yeah, if you guys win that one. I said, yeah, I know. But that's how close you are, and I think you can look back at any cup run, and there's things that go your way when you win it, and there's things that don't go your way when you don't win it. But it made me more proud of that team and that group of guys as to how hard we competed and what that group did, and ultimately helping to solidify the team in the market.
Rod Brindamore knew that team was special, even though details are a little bit, unclear.
I don't have a lot of memories of that. I got to be honest with you. No, it's just no. If you showed me video of it, right, I would be able to go. But I don't know what I basically remember from 2006, and that's about it. 2002 was what I do remember is playing Detroit at the end. So I'm fast forwarding what you just said because I don't have a lot. I do remember the disappointment in sitting in Detroit after we lost. I remember thinking, is this it? Is that going to be my last crack at winning this? And that was not a good day. I remember that because it did feel like we had a good group. We were right there. And it slipped away. It slipped away in that one game where I felt like we had a chance to win, and, they tied up late, and then all that overtime game, and that was a backbreaker.
We know now that Rod would get another chance, as would Kevin Adams 4 years later.
I feel like when I think back on it, Game 3 was such a critical game in that series because, you just don't know how it goes. If we win that game or we, I know they scored late in overtime, but if that doesn't happen, do we win that game? Like, how does that go now? Game 4, we're at home, it feels like that was such a critical part to that series. But, I guess what I learned from that, and maybe those guys had it already because of the experience they had. But what I learned certainly helped me personally in 06 was that you can't let your mind wander for 1 second when you're in a Stanley Cup final, and you can't lose the be in the moment type of thinking, because, I know personally after game 1, I thought, okay, 3 more to go. Let's, we're good and close. But, you can't think like that. It's got to just be next game and next moment, the next shift, and, all of that. And with the amount of experience they had across in that locker room, they probably had a little bit of I don't know if the right way to say it, but maybe a little bit of a better perspective having gone through that, where I know it helped me, and I'm sure it did some of my teammates when we were there in 06.
A few thoughts on what's next after the break. The Carolina Hurricanes have packed a whole lot of drama and success into 25 years. 1 title, another trip to the finals, 2 other Eastern Conference Finals bids, and a handful of division titles. That's a lot, considering there haven't been that many trips to the postseason. So what we have still to come are the best games and the best player moves, think about it as transactions, in the history of the Carolina Hurricanes, the last 25 years. The best games and the best player moves made by the front office. Feel free to reach out with your favorites. Send them along to @AGoldFan on Twitter. I'd love to hear your thoughts. The 25th anniversary Canes Corner podcast, part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network, thanks to our friends at the Aluminum Company of North Carolina, with incredible assistance from Rusty Helser. I'm Adam Gold. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Canes Corner podcast with Adam Gold.
Yeah, I want to drive the Zamboni. Yes, I do.
The Canes Corner podcast is a part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network.